day, grade 8 learners. Welcome to the Natural Sciences lesson. My name is Tebe, and this program is proudly brought to you by the Gauteng Department of Education. This is our second live lesson, grade 8. Interesting, isn't it? Let's look at our topic for today. Our topic is interactions and interdependence within the environment. And then our subtopic, we're going to be looking on ecosystems and feeding relationships. Let's check our objectives. Remember, we need to set a goal for ourselves. We need to aim at achieving something. What is it that we are going to achieve? By the end of this lesson, we are all going to be able to define ecology. We are going to list the 4 levels of ecological interactions. That's our second objective. And then our third objective, we are going to define populations, communities, ecosystems, and biospheres. And then the fourth one, we are going to identify population, communities, ecosystems, and biosphere. And we get all this from the CAPS document, page 36. Then pre-knowledge. What do you think pre-knowledge is, grade 8? If we are looking at pre-knowledge, this is the knowledge that we already have. Remember when you were in grade 5 and 6, what did you learn grade 8? You did the concept of an ecosystem and feeding relationships. And then, what about in grade 7? Remember, you did life and living. But what is it that you did under life and living? You did the biosphere, biodiversity, sexual reproduction in angiosperm, including sections of pollination. That's what we did in the previous grades. All right. And then we've got a baseline activity. Our baseline activity, question number 1 says, what is an ecosystem? Then question number 2, below is a list of things that may be found in a habitat. Sort them into living and non-living things. And then we've got this. We've got water, birds, sunlight, bacteria, carbon dioxide, wind, rock, fungi, grass, and soil. Therefore, you are going to make a table so that you sort this out into living and non-living. I'll just give you 3 minutes to answer the baseline activity. Let's start answering grade 8. As you are done writing the baseline activity, let's do it together and see how we performed. Let's look at question number 1. Question number 1, the solution is all the living and non-living things in an environment and the different ways in which they interact with each other. That's an ecosystem. We are looking at the living and non-living things in an environment and their interaction. How are they interacting? That's the definition. Let's look at question number 2. It said, below is a list of things that may be found in a habitat. Sort them into living and non-living things. We've got water, birds, sunlight, bacteria, carbon dioxide, grass, people, rock, wind, and fungi. And then, remember I said, make a table. You've got a table of living and the other table is for what? Non-living. Let's sort them into a table. We've got non-living, we've got water. We also have sunlight under non-living. We also have carbon dioxide under non-living. We also have wind and rock. All those are non-living. But what about the living? We've got birds, we've got bacteria, grass, fungi, and people. All these are living things, okay? And then, remember we're now in grade 8, we are talking about biotic and abiotic, okay? Let's move on. Let's define the terms. We've got terminology that we need to define in order for us to understand the lesson better. All right. And the other thing, make sure you pay particular attention to terminology because in your exams, you will be defining terms from now up to grade 12. And each term carries about 2 marks. So these are given marks. Let's make use of them. All right, let's check ecology first. This is the study of what? It is the study of interactions between living and non-living. All right, that is the interaction that we are looking at. And here I've written it as the study of interactions between living things and their interaction with their physical and chemical environment. All right, we've got the living and the non-living. And then we are interested in the interaction. All right. For example, we are going to come across different animals. If we come across a community, this is whereby we've got different types of animals. And then they will be in the same environment. And then there is something that is drawing them to that environment. What is it? Mainly, it will be water. Water is non-living, but they will also be grazing, all right, especially the herbivores, but we also have the omnivores and the carnivores, all right. Then there is a what? A food chain, okay, it develops them. Let's move on. We're going to enjoy in our lesson today. Then we've got what? Ecosystem. Here we're looking at the living and the non-living things in an environment and the different ways in which they interact with each other. All right. We want to see how they interact. For example, if you've got grass, then the grasshopper is going to eat grass. Okay. And then what will happen? The other animals will be feeding on other animals. And then we call that a what? A food chain. Okay. And then we've got a population. If we are talking about a population grade 8, we are talking about a group of the same species or animals of the same kind living together, all right, and reproducing. For example, we've got a population of elephants. We are talking about a group of elephants sharing the same environment, but they will be reproducing. Okay. Population, a group of individuals of the same species living in the same ecosystem. And then community. When we are talking about a community, we are talking about different populations. Remember, we said a population is a group of animals of the same kind. But when we are talking about community now, we are talking about different populations, which means different animals sharing the environment, living in the same environment. Most of the times, there will be a drawing factor. It can be water, all right? And then that's where food chains develop. All right, let's define community. These are different populations that interact with each other in the same ecosystem. Okay. And then another term, remember we are defining terms. And I said terminology is very important because we're going to be defining terms from now up to grade 12. And we're going to get a lot of marks. All right. Let's check the next word. It is biosphere. What does the word biosphere mean? Biosphere means different ecosystems on Earth. All the ecosystems combined on Earth. We call that a what? A biosphere. You get it? It is a biosphere. And then let's look at habitat, grade 8. When we are looking at habitat, this is a place where organisms live. It is a habitat. And then ecology is the study of the interaction between non-living and living organisms. That is ecology. For example, we've got the living, that is animals, plants, people, bacteria, fungi, protists. All these are living organisms. And then the non-living parts of the non-living parts are the conditions the organisms need to survive. For example, the non-living, we can talk about the wind. That is non-living. Talk about the soil. Talk about the light. Talk about the temperature. These are non-living. Do you get it? But the living, we're talking about the animals. We're talking about the plants. We are talking about bacteria, protists, fungi. All these are living. But the non-living, don't forget, we are talking about water. We are talking about the soil. We are talking about the wind. We are talking about light. We are talking about sunlight. Okay, that is non-living. And then let's move on. The interactions are classified into 4 different levels. These are the interactions that have been classified into 4 different levels, grade 8. And then let's look at these 4 levels. We've got a population. Remember what we said a population is. When we are talking about a population, we are talking about a group of animals of the same species living together or sharing an environment. For example, we've got a population of what? Of elephants. All right. And then we've got communities. When we're talking about communities, do you remember what you said about communities? Grade 8? All right. Communities, it is different populations living in the same environment. Different animals sharing the same environment. Most of the time, the drawing factor is water. If there is a river, it's likely that you can come across a population. You get that? Because animals will be drawn to the river because they want to drink water. Therefore, you will find communities there. For example, if you've got an elephant, you've got a zebra, you've got a jackal, you've got a lion, you've got a leopard. All these animals are different. Therefore, we call them communities. Some are herbivores, some are omnivores, and some are carnivores. And remember, when we are talking about herbivores, omnivores, and carnivores, do you still remember what we're talking about? All right, let's define those. If we're talking about herbivore, this is an animal that feeds on plants, it is a herbivore. It can be a grazer or a browser. That's a herbivore. An example of this, we've got cows, we've got goats, we've got giraffes, we've got elephants. All these are herbivores. And then we've got omnivores. Omnivores are those animals that will eat meat and they also eat plants. A good example of an omnivore is you and me, human beings. Remember, we eat vegetables and fruits and we also eat meat. Okay, that's a good example, isn't it? That's good. And then we've got carnivores. Carnivores are those animals that feed on other animals. Some of them hunt for their prey, like the lions, the leopards, they hunt for their prey. And then some of them are scavengers. They look for dead animals and feed on them. Okay, all these are carnivores. All right, and then we've got ecosystem. This is an ecosystem. An ecosystem, we're talking about the living and the non-living, and then even including the food chains. Okay, when we're talking about the living, we're talking about the animals. We're talking about bacteria. We're talking about fungi. We're talking about protists. These are the living. And then the non-living, we are talking about the temperature. We're talking about the light. We're talking about water. We're talking about the soil. These are the non-living. And then there is an interaction between the living and the non-living. All right. And then we've got a biosphere. When we're talking about a biosphere, these are different ecosystems combined on Earth. Then we call them a what? A biosphere. Do you get that? That's good, grade 8. I love that. Let's move on. And then interaction between living things. We've got population. Remember what we said about population. These animals are of the same species or the same kind living together, and they also reproduce. For example, we've got a population of elephants and a population of what? Of people. Right. Population is a group of organisms of the same species that live in the same area at a specific point in time, and they can interbreed with each other. They reproduce. For example, let's look at this nice picture here. This is a population of elephants. They are living together. You can even see the young ones. All right. It shows that they reproduce. And then we've got a population of people. Do you see that? And they also reproduce. Okay. Let's move on. And then we've got interaction between living things. We've got a poster of flowers. These are different flowers. They are not the same. All right? They are different. You can see the other ones are yellow, some are red, some are orange, some are purple, some are pink, some are green. All these are different types of flowers. And then on this other photo here, you can see different types of animals in one area, in the same environment. And then this type of group here, it is a community. Why are we saying it is a community, grade 8? It is because we've got different types of animals in the same area, and these ones are drawn by what? By water. They are all coming to drink in the river. All right. That's why we come across communities. There is something that is drawing them together. There is something in common that they want, which is, water. And then you can see we've got different animals. You can see giraffes, you can see zebras, you can see lions, you can see springboks. All these are animals drawn together. And then what can we say about the community? The community is the populations of organisms that interact in a certain area or they live together. There are different populations in one area. That is a community. All right. And then interactions between living things. We've got ecosystem. Remember what we said about ecosystem. It is made up of what? It is made up of two parts. We've got the living and the non-living. All right. These are two parts. Hence, an ecosystem is the interaction between the community and the non-living environment. We've got a poster here. All right. This poster is very attractive. It has got different types of animals. Remember, different types of animals living or sharing an environment. We call that a community because we've got different types of animals, or you can say different populations. Okay. You can see that they've been drawn by water. We've got water here, which is non-living parts, and then we've got the living organisms. We've got different types of animals. You can see elephants, you can see lions, you can see birds, you can see hippos, you can see camels, giraffes, hippos. All these are living. And then what is drawing them together? It is water. And remember, we said water is non-living. All right. And then they've been drawn together. Therefore, we call them a what? We call that a community. Easy, isn't it? Yes, it is a community. And then what about a biosphere? Remember what we said about a biosphere. We said it is all the ecosystems on Earth combined that make up a what? That make up a biosphere. And then you can see the Earth here. We've got all the ecosystems. All right. Earth enables things to live or to survive. All right. It is a planet that is possible to live in. Remember the planets that we have. We've got a lot of planets. We've got 8 planets. But Earth is the one that is possible to live in because we've got water, we've got the sun at the right temperature. That's why we've got plants. Remember, plants need what? Photosynthesis. All right. In order for them to live, in order for them to produce their own food, in order for them to grow, so that we can also eat plants. How do we eat plants? They produce what? They produce sugars in the form of fruits, in the form of leaves, in the form of stems, in the form of roots. We eat all those. And then someone can say, in the form of roots? What do we eat in the form of fruits? All right, if we're talking about plants, photosynthesis. If we're talking about fruits that are edible, we are talking about potatoes. We're talking about carrots, about parsnips. We've got quite a number of foods that we get. And then we also have what? Stems, like celery. We eat celery. Okay, that is food to us. And then what about leaves? We eat spinach. Those are foods, all right, that we get from plants. We also have fruits. We've got different types of fruits. For example, a vegetable fruit is what? A tomato. We eat that. Okay. And we've got different types of fruits. Therefore, plants are important in our lives. They are the producers, which means they make their own food. And then we get food from them because they give us a product that is glucose. Remember, glucose is a simple sugar. And then we also get a byproduct that is oxygen, which we inhale because we need it for what? We need it for respiration so that we can be energetic. For example, now, we are very energetic because we are learning. We are able to learn because we've eaten something. All right, let's move on. Ecosystems. The non-living parts of an ecosystem influence which organisms can live there. That is ecosystems. We are now talking about what? The non-living parts of an ecosystem. They influence living organisms that live there. Why are we saying the non-living will influence the types of organisms that live there? For example, let's take a desert area. A desert area, it is very hot during the day. It is infertile. It doesn't have a lot of plants, but it has got desert plants like thorns. And then we also have animals that live in those conditions that are designed to survive in a desert. For example, we can say a camel. How does it survive in a desert? Remember, a camel can go for days without drinking water. It can go for days without eating. All right? And it has got a rubbery mouth. Why am I saying it has got rubber mouth? Remember, camels can eat thorns. All right? They've been designed to survive in a desert. All right? And let's look at the physique. It is very strong because it will be walking on sand. Remember a desert. Just picture a desert in your mind. All right? But a camel can survive in a desert. Therefore, the living parts are influenced by the non-living. All right? And then we've got other areas like the equatorial rainforest. We've got animals that survive in an equatorial rainforest. We also have animals that survive in a savanna area. Okay. Different populations in a community depend on each other for food. All right. Once you see a community, then there is a food chain. Okay. Because animals depend on other animals for food. Let's move on. An ecosystem is made up of living and non-living. We call these abiotic and biotic. All right. These are abiotic and biotic, which means living and non-living. And then the size of a real ecosystem is not defined in terms of what? In terms of area, but rather by the interaction that occurs inside it. Right? It's difficult to define it by the size, but rather by the interaction that occurs inside it. Okay? And then we've got grasslands, we've got forests, we've got deserts. In grasslands, we've got animals that survive in grasslands. Okay. For example, this is a grassland here. We've got animals that survive in a grassland. And a lot of things happen in a grassland. Okay. We've got a food chain that is taking place there. For example, you can see we've got herbivores. They are busy grazing. Okay. We've got herbivores, and then we also have omnivores, and we also have what? Carnivores that are going to feed on these animals. These animals are feeding on plants, but there are animals that are going to feed on them. Then the food chain will carry on. And then we've got rainforests. We've got forests. For example, we've got rainforest. There are animals that survive in that condition. Okay. They survive, and there is also a food chain. They feed on different things. For example, we've got animals that feed on leaves, and we've got other animals that feed on those animals. And then we've got deserts. We've got animals that survive in a desert. They are designed in a way that they will survive in a desert. All right. Remember, in a desert, it is very dry and hot, but we've got animals that survive there. Okay. Therefore, the conditions, that is the non-living, influence the living organisms that live in that area. And then we've got water then. Remember, water will draw animals to eat. Okay. And then we've got a what? a log, we've got a rotting log. Even if it's rotting, what's going on? Why does it rot? We've got decomposers that break it down. All right? And when the decomposers are breaking it down, we've got manure, we've got fertile soil. Okay? The nutrients will go to the soil, and then the soil will be fertile so that the plants will grow and thrive. All right. Interesting. It's just a cycle. You see that? It's a cycle. And then survival depends on interactions. The survival of an individual organisms and population depend on their ability to cope with the changes in their habitat or the ecosystem. It depends on the ecosystem or even on the habitats. Okay. It is influenced mainly by the conditions. Changes can be sudden. For example, when a habitat is suddenly destroyed by fire or people, or more gradual, such as changes in temperature in the seasons. For example, now there's a lot of changes in the weather system. That's why we've got what? We've got tsunamis, we've got a lot of earthquakes, we've got mudslides. All right, we've got wildfires. All these affect our living style. They affect the animals. All right. Let's talk about the carbon footprint. It changes the what? The climate. Okay. It affects. That's why we've got a lot of changes. All right. The seasons are changing. Why? It is because of the carbon that is in the atmosphere. It is because of the plastic that you throw in the ground rather than put it in a bin. All right. So let's go green, grade 8. Let's make sure we recycle and reuse. Okay. Survival depends on interactions. Some organisms have the ability to cope or adapt quickly to these changes. Some organisms, they adapt. They adapt to an environment so that they can survive. Because if they don't adapt, when I say adapt, you understand what I'm talking about, grade 8. I mean that they change to suit the environment so that they survive. Because if they don't change, what's going to happen? They die. All right. Therefore, there's need for change. This may be because they feed on a large variety of food or because they can survive in a range of different habitats. Do you understand that? All right. We've got an exercise here which I want you to write. The study of ecological interactions is divided into 4 levels. Name them. I want you to name all the 4 levels. All right? Number 1 says the study of ecological interactions is divided into 4 levels. I want you to name those 4 levels. I'll just give you 3 minutes to name those 4 levels and explain them. Good, grade 8. You are done writing. That's very good. Let's look at the question again. It says the study of ecological interaction is divided into 4 levels. Name them. We are going to name all the 4 levels together. All right. We've got these at our 4 levels. We've got population. Here we said a population is a study of, when you're defining population, you say it is a group of organisms, all of the same kind or species living in the same place. Okay, at the same time. When we're talking about a population, we are talking about a group of animals of the same species living together. For example, we've got a good example of elephants. Elephants live together, okay? When they are together, when they are a group, we call it a population. Do you get it? And they reproduce. They share the same environment, they travel together, and they reproduce within themselves. And then we also have a population of people. When we are talking about a population of people, we live together. Although we live in different continents, but we live together. And then we also reproduce. That's why we are having a generation after generation. It is because we reproduce. Do you get it? That's a population. Animals of the same species. And then we've got another interaction level. We've got community. This is population. We've got community. When we are talking about a community, we are talking about different populations. We are talking about different animals in the same environment. For example, if you see different types of animals, let's say you see zebras, elephants, lions, cheetahs, birds, pigs, in the same area, it means it is a community. Why am I saying it is a community? Because they are different and they share the same environment. Do you get that? Most of the times, there is a drawing factor. For example, if we visit a game park, all right? What are you going to see in a game park? Where there is a river, you will see a community. Why? Because the animals are drawn by the water. They want to drink some water. Okay? Therefore, you will find a what? A community. And that is where the food chains and food webs develop there. Because we've got the what? We've got the herbivores that will be grazing, that will be feeding on plants. And then we've got the omnivores, those animals that are going to be feeding on plants and also on other animals. And then we also have what? The carnivores. We've got different types of carnivores. And the carnivores are those animals that eat or feed on meat. All right. We've got that type of carnivore animal that is going to hunt for its prey. For example, we've got leopards. They are carnivores. They hunt for their prey. We've got lions. We've got cheetahs. We've got pumas. They hunt for their prey. And then we've got those carnivores that are looking for dead animals. We call those scavengers. They look for dead animals, then they eat. We've got vultures. They are carnivores. They are scavengers. All right. All those, we call them a community if there are different types of animals in the same area. And I've said the drawing factor is what? It is water most of the times. Because in the water, we'll be having crocodiles. And then we've got different animals. Some of them want to cross. Then the crocodiles will catch them and eat. All right. That's a good food chain. And then we've got ecosystem. When we're talking about ecosystem, we're talking about a community and its habitat. All right. That's an ecosystem. We're talking about biotic and abiotic. We're talking about the living and the non-living. That's an ecosystem. All right. Animals are going to interact with the non-living. When we're talking about the living and the non-living, we're talking about animals. We're talking about bacteria. We're talking about protists. We're talking about fungi. Or the living, we're talking about plants. Then they interact with the non-living, which is the wind, which is the sunlight, which is water, which is the soil. Those are non-living, and we've got living organisms. But these interact with each other. All right. Why? Because the living organisms want to survive. All right. And then an environment is going to determine or influence the types of animals that will live there. Why are we saying that? Remember, we've got grasslands. We've got equatorial rainforests. We've got deserts. All right? We also have oceans. There are animals that survive in oceans. We've got animals that survive in rivers. All right? We've got animals that survive in deserts. Why am I saying oceans and rivers? Remember, in a river, we've got fresh water. Therefore, we've got freshwater species. All right? When I say we've got freshwater species, what do I mean, grade 8? Do you understand that? We've got crocodiles. Crocodiles live in freshwater. If I say freshwater, I mean the rivers. Water from the rivers. The water that we are drinking. We're drinking fresh water. All right? Therefore, we've got different animals that live in that water. Do you get it? For example, we've got crocodiles. We've got hippos. They live in fresh water. And then we also have the species that survive in salty water. All right? Remember, the oceans, the seas, have got the what? The salt water. But we've got animals that survive in salt water. For example, we've got sharks. They survive in salt water. All right. They live in salt water. We've got jellyfish. They live in salt water. You get that? These are the differences of environments. We've got different environments. And then we've got Ismangaliso Wetland Park in KwaZulu-Natal, which is at the coast. All right? And it is Ismangaliso Wetland Park because it is a wonder. Why are we saying it is a wonder? Because it has got freshwater species and also saltwater species. But it will be difficult to see with your naked eye that this is saltwater and this is freshwater. But we can determine that because of the species that live in that lake. All right. Interesting, isn't it? All right. Let's move on. And then we've got biosphere. When we are talking about the biosphere, we've said a biosphere is a combination of the Earth's ecosystems. All right. That is a biosphere. Okay. For example, on Earth, we've got different ecosystems. Okay. Remember, the Earth is round and we are living on the crust, on the outside. Okay. And then we've got different ecosystems. Interesting, isn't it? All right, grade 8. Who got everything correct? Oh, that's correct. Excellent. And those who didn't get it correct, don't worry. Just listen and start your work. You will do it next time. I trust you. Let's move on. Let's summarize our lesson. All right. As we are summarizing our lesson, we've got different organisms, remember, that we've talked about. Let's look at the picture there. We've got an organism here, and then we've got a population. We've got an organism. If it's one, just call it an organism. But if it is a group of the same species, that is a population. Okay. And then if it is a population, it means it is a group of the same species of animals living in the same environment. And then they'll be reproducing. All right? They'll be making young ones. And then we've got a what? We've got a community. When we are talking about a community, we are talking about different populations. When we say different populations, it means different animals. All right? Different animals living in the same environment. Let's look at this picture here. This is interesting. I love this. We've got a community. We've got different animals. Very different. Even birds, even lions, even zebras. All right? These animals live in the same environment. And most of the times, the drawing factor will be what? The drawing factor will be food. Mostly it is water. Because the animals will eat, but they need water to drink. Then they'll be drawn to a riverbank. And then they'll start drinking water. And then we call them a what? A community, because it will be different types of species, different kinds of animals. Right. We've got crocodiles in the water and hippos. We also have herbivores that will be grazing. And we also have omnivores that will graze and also eat animals. And we also have carnivores that are going to be hunting for their prey, that will be killing animals so that they can eat. And we've got other carnivores that are scavengers, who are looking for dead animals so that they can eat them. And then we've got an ecosystem. When we are talking about an ecosystem, we are talking about the interaction between abiotic and biotic. What do I mean there? I mean the living and the non-living. All right. The non-living, for example, on this picture, we've got water. This is water. Okay. This is non-living. And then we've got living organisms. When we're talking about living organisms, we are talking about birds. We are talking about animals. We are talking about vegetation, the plants. These are living. All right. And then we also have the sun. The sun, remember, it is non-living. This draws us and reminds us of a question. Some of you have asked a question about photosynthesis. This is a good picture to explain photosynthesis. All right. What do you think photosynthesis is? Remember, we did photosynthesis last week, and then someone has asked about photosynthesis. Then we're going to talk about now. When we're talking about photosynthesis, if you want to define photosynthesis and not make a mistake, firstly, make sure you know the requirements of a plant. The requirement for photosynthesis, we need the sun, which is the what? The ultimate source of energy. We need the sun. We've got our sun here. This is our sun. Ultimate source of energy. Get radiation energy there. And then the plant will also need what? It will also need carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Okay. And then it will also need what? It will need water from the soil. Okay. Then whilst we've got the sun, we've got the radiant energy, the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, water from the soil, then the plant will be able to produce its food. All right? It will be able to grow. Remember, plants are producers, and we've got only one producer, which is plants. All right? They produce their own food. Okay? And then we've got the products that we get from what? From plants. When we're talking about product, it is those things that we are getting from plants. What is it that we get from plants? We get glucose. And how do we define glucose? Glucose is a simple sugar. All right. And then it means we are getting food from the what? From the plants. But we get food in different ways. Which ways are those? We get food in the form of roots of plants. And our examples, we've got carrots, we've got beetroot, we've got potatoes, we've got parsnips. All those are foods that we get from plants, from the roots of plants. And we get food from the leaves of plants. And which leaves give us food? For example, spinach. We eat the leaves of spinach. Okay. That is a leaf vegetable. All right. Therefore, we eat leaves. We've got different types of leaves. We eat them. And then we also have what? We've got roots, we've got leaves, we've got stems. Which stems do we eat? Which stems do we eat? We eat celery, especially in our salads. And celery is rich in what? It is rich in what? In roughage. That is cellulose. And then roughage aids in the digestion. It helps us to digest. Okay. And then we've got roots, we've got stems, we've got leaves, and then we also have fruits. Right. We've got different types of fruit. Remember the fruit trees, all the fruits that you can think of. Now we're eating mangoes, we are eating oranges, all those are fruits. And even in vegetables, we've got fruit vegetables like the tomato. All right. We eat all these. That's the food that we are getting from plants. That's why we say the plants give us glucose. They give us sugars. They give us food. All right. And they also give us a byproduct that is oxygen that we desperately need to breathe. We inhale oxygen. Why do we inhale oxygen? We inhale oxygen because we want respiration to take place. All right. As respiration is taking place, it is releasing energy from the what? From the food that we have eaten, and then we use that energy for different activities. As it is, we are enjoying this lesson, we are learning, we are understanding. It is because we ate something. We've got energy. All right. And then this is photosynthesis. And someone asked about life processes. Remember, we've got 7 life processes. We've got reproduction, we've got growth, we've got sensitivity. All these are life processes. All right. Life has to move on. Life has to go on. All right. Even for growth, we need to grow and we need to reproduce. Okay. So that the generation will carry on and on and on for life. All right. That those are the 2 questions that we have. I hope you are answered. All right. Let's move on. We're going to biosphere. Biosphere, this is when we are talking about all the ecosystems combined on Earth. That is a biosphere. Remember, Earth is a sphere and we live on the crust. That's why we see continents on top. This is our beautiful Africa here. All right. This is Earth and this is a biosphere. All the ecosystems combined on Earth is called a what? A biosphere. Interesting lesson, isn't it? All right. We've answered your WhatsApp questions. And if you still have some more WhatsApp questions, don't hesitate. Just ask. Our number is 064 748 8913. Our number again is 064 748 8913. Make sure you ask what you didn't understand because this was a good lesson. I enjoyed it. Hope you did. All right. Before we close our lesson off, let's write a homework. Let's copy the homework. Let's check. Question number 1 says, what are the 4 different levels of interactions between living organisms? All right. Let's answer that one. Let's just copy it now. Then we're going to answer it at home. I'll give you 3 minutes to answer that. 3 minutes is for you to copy the homework. Good. You have copied the homework. Then when you are at home, make sure you answer the question. What are the 4 levels of interactions between living organisms? Right. Hope you have enjoyed the lesson. But the brief preview of the next lesson, next week, Tuesday, same time, we are going to be looking at food chains. We're going to look at the food chains, how they interact, how the organisms interact. For example, we've got the producers, that is the grass, then the grasshopper feeding on the grass, and then the bird feeding on the grasshopper, the snake feeding on the bird, then the owl feeding on the snake. And then when the owl is dead, then there are decomposers which are going to break it down and then release the nutrients back to the soil. And then the plants are going to grow in a fertile soil. You'll see that this is a cycle. Interesting, isn't it? Thank you very much, grade 8. Hope you have enjoyed the lesson. And then make sure you always click on complete and continue after I've watched the lesson, so that we'll be able to see that you have completed watching this lesson. Make sure you always sanitize, maintain social distance, and always wear a mask. So long for now.